it's me, Chris Jurgensen. So last time we did Phrygian, and the time before that we did Dorian. This time we're moving on to Mixolydian. Now, Mixolydian is really common, and I don't want to oversimplify Mixolydian. Now, this goes for really all the modes, but how you pick a mode or your approach to playing the solo is going to depend on different things. First of all, it's going to depend on the style of music you're playing, but also it's going to depend on the chord. Now, today we're in G, we're talking about G Mixolydian, so an easy way to find it, if you got a G7 and you want to play Mixolydian, you just think up a fourth. What's up a fourth from G? G, A, B, C. A C major scale over a G7 chord is going to be G Mixolydian. That's why a blues harp player, when he comes up to the stage to jam out with you and he says, what key? And you go G, he picks a C harmonica, and that's because C major scale and G Mixolydian scale is the same thing. Now, when we harmonize it, and we look at the scale, the intervals from G, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flat 7 scale. So it's like a major scale with a flat 7. So if we harmonize these a chord at a time, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, it would be G7. Then you'd have G9 if you keep going. Next, we have the fourth, right? The 11th. But here's the problem. Thirds and fourths don't dig each other so much. So mostly, if you're going to include a fourth, you don't have a third, right? So like a G9 sus4. If we keep going one more, we get a G13 sus4, okay? No third. And that's the definitive chord for Mixolydian, a dominant chord with a suspended fourth. So I'm going to do like the biggest chord I can do here for our first jam, and that's going to be a G13 sus4. It's easy to play. All it is like F major 7 over G. Right? Now, getting on to the other important thing to remember about dominant chords is that there's two kinds of dominant chords. The first is like what we call a non-functioning dominant chord, meaning it isn't going to anywhere. It's not going to a one chord. Those functioning dominant chords, you have different choices because you can create tension that pushes towards the one chord, right? Non-functioning dominant chords are not going anywhere. They're static chords, like a static jam like we're doing today. In that case, Mixolydian is a good choice. The other thing that you have to understand about dominant chords, there's one factor here about dominant chords that's different than other chords, and that's the blues factor. Over a G7 chord, sometimes we just think G blues, right? So that's another thing that you have to sort of consider. And depending on how the chord is voiced, how many extensions it has on it, it sort of changes the way that you play over it a little bit, okay? So let's get on to the jam, okay? Now, remember, I said F major 7 over G is like a G sus chord, right? Now, different ways to play it. You could just play F over G, that's fine. In this case, I'm playing it like this. Now, this has the sus fourth in it, which makes it a good choice, Mixolydian a good choice for this chord. So you can just play different F major 7 chords over a G bass note, let your bass player play it, and it'll work fine, you know, like any of the ones that you know. Or this is a great one. So let's check that out, okay? Okay, so here we go. Remember, I said think up a fourth, right? So in this case, G7, what's up a fourth? G, A, B, C, C major scale. If you play C major scale over this G13 sus4 chord, you're going to get a total Mixolydian sound. when I do this, you can use all the arpeggios that are inside that key. That's why I think a lot of times it's helpful to really sort of think of this as C major, because any of the arpeggios that are in there you can use. It sounds fine over this chord. This chord has so many extensions that a lot of those other arpeggios are just chord tones to this chord, right? And also any chromaticism that you might use, like using that Barry Harris's chromatic scale, you can use right here. Works perfectly fine. Okay, so moving on. Remember, like we did the last time, every key has 3 minor pentatonic scales, right? So in this case, we're in the key of C, and the minor pentatonic scales match the minor chords. The 2 chord is D, so D minor pentatonic scale. E minor, so E minor pentatonic scale. And then the 6th chord would be A minor, so A minor pentatonic scale are all good choices. Now, if you want to think of it as a rule, so you don't have to go thinking back to the diatonic chords, in the key center, to remember, you can play a minor pentatonic scale on the 2nd, the 5th, and the 6th. 2nd, 5th, and 6th. 2nd of G would be A minor, right? The 5th of G7 would be D minor, right? And then the 6th would be E minor. So those are the pentatonic scales you can use. Now, this is why the voicing is going to be really important by determining your approach to playing, because I'm playing a G13 sus4 chord. So it's really all the extensions, right? All of them. So that means there's a lot of extra notes that you wouldn't usually get in just a G7, right? You're getting the 9th and the 13th up there too. So that means that these minor pentatonic scales are going to work pretty good because they have a lot of those extensions, and they're going to be good matches. So let's check those out. So next, the triads. Remember, we're in the key of C, so we have a C triad, an F triad, and a G triad, right? So again, you can simply think on the 4th, the flat 7, and on the root, right? So the 4th would be C, G, A, B, C. The flat 7 would be a whole step below, so F, and then on the root, G. These are effective, especially when there's a lot of extensions on the chord, like a 9 sus4 or something like that. So let's listen to that. Okay, so these are your choices, right? Let's review here. G7, especially if it's a G sus, especially if it's G sus or G9 sus or G13 sus. You have the modal scale itself. You think up a 4th. In this case, G13 sus4. You think C major, up a 4th. Next up, the 3 minor pentatonic scales. and next the triads on the fourth, the flat 7, and the root. Those are the triad arpeggios that you can use. Okay, so try to play all these things as many ways as you possibly can. But now we're getting on to like a problem. Now, what if it's like blues? Blues, it's not a sus chord, right? It's not this big fancy long vamp or anything. It's just like a swinging shuffle or something like that. Are these good choices? I don't know. Well, you have to try it, right? But remember, it doesn't have that fourth in it. So my advice is that, because what's the big difference between a blues and sort of like a soul or smooth jazz kind of thing that we just did? What's the big difference? Well, the big difference is that you got the blues scale now, right? I don't think in that last one, the blues scale is like a great choice. Let's listen to it and see if I'm right or if I'm wrong. I'll play like Mixolydian and then I'll just do a blues thing and see if I can make it work. It's not going to be as easy as you'd like to believe. I mean, it's okay, right? I mean, what do you think? Did it work? I mean, it does sort of work, but it's not really smooth anymore. It takes the smoothness out of it. So these are things that you have to consider. Now, in the case of just like a G7 vamp, this is just G7. It's not anything fancy. Well, now, my suggestion here is that you use like the blues scale and you mix it up with the Mixolydian scale. But you use more of the bebop language. It works good in the blues to me. So in that case, you might want to play like the Mixolydian scale with the chromatic passing tones, right? And diatonic arpeggios. It's just a different sort of approach. So let's try that. All right, so you see what I did there is I used the blues scale and I used G Mixolydian using some of the chromatic language that we get from jazz, right? And that's a good way to mix these up. Maybe I stay away from the major triad arpeggios, and maybe I stay away from those 3 minor pentatonic scales a little bit, okay? So these are the things you have to consider. Next, for the next lesson, we're going to keep going with Mixolydian, and we're going to move on to what I call the cousin scale. The cousin scale in this case is going to be Lydian Dominant, okay? And I'm going to talk about when you'd want to use that in the next lesson. And so, and also I'm going to talk about how you would use Mixolydian in more of a rock type situation. All right, so stay tuned for that one, and get to practicing. All right, so have a nice day and check out the demo.